Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and I want to talk about not necessarily Dungeons and Dragons 5e, but Dungeons and Dragons as an overall game. And I'm talking about play styles or player styles. There are actually many different types of player styles, and it's quite important as a dungeon master to identify which people at your table are the players who play a particular way. Because if you can figure out that, you can meet their needs, you can expect certain behaviors from those sorts of players, and it makes it a lot easier for you to figure out what's going on and to adjust yourself and present a better experience for your players and a better experience for yourself. Now, the Dungeon Master Guide for 5e has little to no information on page 34 other than the basics. Now, when I say other than nothing, there's about a page there, but all it says is play styles consist of hack and slash or immersive storytelling or some sort of thing in between, a combination of hack and slash and players who like immersive storytelling. But you can actually break this up into a lot more little categories if you wanted to. And as it happens, the Wizards of the Coast team did. Quite a few years back, they wrote another Dungeon Master Guide, and it spelled out quite a few different play styles. And I want to talk about them right now, so you've got a fair idea of what to expect in your game from your players. Let us start off with the first play style. That is the actor. The actor likes to pretend to be their character. They are going to emphasize character development, their character development, over other things. They're not quite so interested in numbers and powers. They'll try their best to sort of role play the character. They might even use a particular accent or voice. They're less interested in things like monsters, and they are really into immersing themselves and being the character they have selected. Now, this is a great thing because it certainly makes it a lot easier for you to get your players to sort of be interested. They will do all the work for you, so you don't have to worry too much about that. One of the things that you'll notice with the actor when it comes to role-playing and a play style is that they will provide you with a character background. They will emphasize personality. They play according to their character motivations. So they will sometimes forget about the motivations of the players at the table and be more focused on something like their character. One of the most common statements you might get from an actor is that that's what my character would do though. And often this is something that you'll get in your game. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes that's a bad thing. They will prefer scenes where they can portray their character and focus on their character. They often prefer social encounters to fighting. Now, how do you engage the actor? Facilitate their personality and their backgrounds and development. So incorporate it into the game. They will love that sort of thing. They really, really jump on it. Provide role-playing encounters, so social encounters where they get to talk with their character, with the NPCs or the monsters. It doesn't matter as long as they get to communicate. They will emphasize their character's personality at times. So try to pick up on things that are important to their personality and bring that in. You can recruit the actor to help create narrative campaign elements. They will also, to a large degree, get the rest of the players interested in playing their character or role-playing their character and going quite deep. So there's some very, very beneficial aspects to having an actor at your table in terms of play style. Some of the things you might want to be careful of and adjust yourself to, and that is these. Be sure that the actor doesn't do the following. Bore the other players. It's entirely possible they could take up an entire 3 or 4 hour session just role-playing their character interaction. So that would be boring for other players. Not always, but sometimes it is, okay? So you need to be careful that they don't pretty much take all of the air time at your table. Justifying some of the disruptive actions their characters might pursue, and having the excuse that I'm playing in character. You need to remind people who are playing as an actor that it's not just about the character. You have to interact with people and they need to be happy with how you are playing at the game. So if they're not comfortable with what you're doing, you need to adjust that. You can't just do whatever you think your character would do and that's it. There are a few things that I have also noticed with actors, and that is they can lose perspective on reality with regard to separating themselves from their character. So something like character death has a huge impact on the play style of the actor. So you need to be understanding that they won't really find that an enjoyable experience. And so I would suggest being understanding and giving them time to deal with that. They might demand quite a lot of talking time. You'll find that this is just a product of them trying to engage, and they don't understand sometimes that they are taking up more time than they really need to. It takes a very mature and experienced player who has the style of the actor to be able to give equal time to everybody at the table. And I know a lot of people will say, well, that's what the job of the dungeon master. They're supposed to make sure that all happens. But you'll find that an actor will tend to engage so much that as a dungeon master, you might get caught up in what they're doing. Remind them that the main quest is the goal, not the character development of their character or the PC they are playing. You need to keep bringing them back to the main goal of the adventure, whatever it might be. Save the princess, defeat the dragon, stop the tyrants, whatever it might be. Next on our list is the explorer. Now, I like explorers for a number of different reasons, but there are other things that can come up with explorers. The thing with explorers is they literally love to see new places. They love the fantastic world. They want to see and try everything out. They want to talk to all of the residents, all of the NPCs. They want to go to places. They want to go to fairs. They want to see whatever there is that you have placed in your world. They want to experience that. They're all about the wonder and experience of your world. They love new cultures. They will jump on so many different things. They are often mistaken. The explorer is often mistaken as a storyteller, but not so much a storyteller. They are more focused on all of the little intricate bits and pieces within your world. They will seek out new experiences, so giving them new experiences, things they've never done before, they will love that. Presenting that in the game setting is always a good thing. They will like hidden facts and locating lost items and places. So things like secret doors, hidden chests, and more. The more you can provide that's hidden and secret that they can discover, like little Easter eggs sitting out there waiting for them. They enjoy atmosphere as much as combat and story. So a lot of the detail that you might give, whether that be sight, smell, senses, they love that sort of stuff. They will jump on it quite a lot. They will tend to advance the plot by being willing to do something else. You'll find that the explorer, because they are constantly looking for something new, something else they haven't seen, they will seek out so much stuff that it will make it quite easy for you to move your story onward. So it's quite helpful to you. Now, there are some aspects to the explorer that aren't always necessarily super helpful either. I put up Tomb Raider and Indiana Jones as examples of the explorer They are obviously, those particular characters are mixes of other things, but their main focus is to explore and find new things, and that's the thing I want you to remember. How do you engage the explorer? Include encounter elements that call for exploration. So it doesn't have to be combat, it doesn't have to be a social interaction, it just needs to be an ability to go and find and explore the environment, give them a location to explore. Reward their curiosity. Now, if they get curious about something, reward that. If they are willing to explore, so giving them things they can find, it doesn't have to be magic items. It can be something as very, very simple and mundane. But the fact that it's been hidden away there, they will often pocket those things and come up with a reason for using it later on. Provide rich details, use cool maps, you can use props and miniatures. They love that sort of thing. That always helps them. Recruit them to be the mapper, the person who maps for the party. Really helpful. They love that sort of thing. They will know where north, south, east and west is. So get them to do the mapping for the party, or at least keep the maps and remind people where things are if you need to. Now there are some things you need to ensure and be careful with regard to the explorer. Be sure that the explorer doesn't use knowledge of the game world to their own advantage. Now that's really essentially metagaming. Look, so much metagaming is built into the current version of Dungeons & Dragons 5e anyway, but you won't really understand that till it comes across. But you will find that they will tend to use knowledge of the world to their advantage, particularly if it's a world that you haven't created and that has been pre-published, like the Forgotten Realms, Eberron, where they might be able to jump in, find that book and read all about it and know everything there is to know. So placing your adventure in a pre-made or a setting that's already been developed by somebody else, they would use that sort of information to their advantage sometimes. Boring the other players by exhausting them as they thirst for every single detail. Sometimes it's not necessary to explore the entire environment or location or castle or dungeon, and they will be adamant that they must explore every single location, go everywhere, do everything, and sometimes that will frustrate the other players. One of the things I've noticed about explorers, other than the desire to investigate the entire world, is the more fantastic and exotic you can make your world, the better it is for them and for you. And to be honest, probably better for everybody. There's no way of knowing what they will find interesting. You'll be surprised what they will latch onto and find hugely exciting and interesting. So the more stuff you put in there, the better, and then you'll find out as you go. So knowing in advance is probably not going to be possible. Experience is really what it comes down to. They will sacrifice story over just exploring. Sometimes their exploring will advance the story, and sometimes it will grind it to a halt as they try to seek out everything they possibly can. So you need to be aware of those particular factors because they can creep into the game if you aren't careful. The next one is the instigator. Now for those of you who are unaware of my game style, one of my play styles as a player is the instigator. So I know a lot about the instigator and why they function the way they do. An instigator enjoys making things happen. It really doesn't matter what they make happen sometimes, they just make stuff happen. They're not very patient. You have to be very careful when it comes to planning with these guys. These people, they tend to do not like long planning processes. If you deliberate over things too much, they will jump in and just provoke an authority figure or activate a trap or open a door because essentially everybody has sort of decided they need to plan and come up with better solutions, or they're unsure what they should do. So those are the things that instigators can cause. They can be seen as being quite disruptive too. Now I know you're thinking, Fred, you said you were an instigator. and they're disruptive. Actually, every play style to a large degree, apart from a few, are quite disruptive given the opportunity. They can be quite disruptive. There are two types of instigator, those who are good and those that are bad for your game group. And it's not so much them, it's just the behavior they are exhibiting, okay? So the instigator, they like to make things happen, as I said. They like to take crazy risks and make deliberately bad choices. They don't see bad choices and bad things happening as in the game as being something to be avoided. They actually think it's a good thing. And to be fair, I think sometimes it is. They thrive in combat and they dislike having nothing to do. You have to give the instigator, those players who like to instigate, give them lots to do so they don't get bored, okay? They like to have decisive action. They want to take a decisive decision and action when things grind to a halt. As soon as if things are moving along and things are progressing, all is good. But as soon as things grind to a halt, we're in trouble and the instigator jumps in. Leroy Jenkins is one example, I suppose. We all know about Leroy Jenkins if you've played video games. Another example would be the gremlin, the spanner in the works. The individual who decides that it's going to be interesting to see what happens if we just do this thing. So how do you engage the instigator? Include objects and encounters that involve experimentation, trying new things out, doing different stuff. Let their actions put the characters in a tight spot, but not kill them off, okay? Sometimes the instigator will get the group into a bit of a mess, so allow the tight spot or the tension to build up, but you need to be understanding that sometimes they will lead the party in directions that aren't good, and it's all right to knock the players' characters out. It's all right for you to adjust things a little bit. Including encounters with non-player characters who are as feisty as they are. So if instigators often play characters who are quite feisty and in your face. So present those sorts of NPCs in your game and that will help a lot. Be sure that the instigator doesn't do the following though. Get the rest of the group killed, because they can. Attack the other PCs or their allies. They are prone to PvP, and they are prone to taking out allies. They may not know that particular NPC is an ally, but sometimes they will start fights with them. So you just need to be aware of it, that they will try to do those sorts of things. So you need to talk to them. I wouldn't necessarily take them aside or anything like that, but you'll find that occasionally you will need to talk to them and say, look, you need to sort of bring it down a bit. Some of the things I know about instigators, because as I said, I am one, they're really good for moving the story forward. They will absolutely, when the players are paralyzed and just don't know what to do, the instigator will make things move forward. Sometimes in a good way and sometimes in a bad way, but they will move the story forward. The bad aspect to the instigator, we've already gone over a few things, but sometimes you get those individuals who just like to throw a spanner into the story, into the machine, into the works, and just watch chaos unfold. That's not really very helpful to your group. And I think probably the most common factor, so you need to watch their body language and their face and how they're operating. This is why you need to give them jobs, whether it's keeping track of initiative or anything you can possibly think of that will keep them busy, okay? They get frustrated with other players very easily because they have all these other play styles at the table and they aren't making things happen sometimes. If the players are making things happen, they're happy, but they can get frustrated and quite emotional. So that's the instigator. One of my favorites, which I know it sounds strange because I know they've got a bad rap, But the reason they're one of my favorites is because they are relatively predictable in how they function. And that is the power gamer. Power gamers, they thrive on gaining levels. They love cool abilities, new abilities, features, new races, new class archetypes. They look to how can I defeat a monster more quickly than before? How can I be more efficient and effective, not just in combat, but with my role-playing and my skill checks and my ability checks? They want awesome abilities and features. They thrive on magic items. It's like catnip to them. Most players have a little bit of power gamer in them usually, but not all. And there are some core elements that you'll find with power gamers. They optimize their characters' attributes usually for combat performance, and often you'll find if they're really, really capable, they will optimize to be able to cover every aspect of the game: combat, exploration, and social interactions. I know that sounds strange, but it's true. I've seen it happen. They will pore over books and PDFs of supplements for better character options. They will spend hours. They spend a lot of time on those aspects of the game. They spend less time on story and role-playing elements. Those things are less interesting to them. They do prefer combat usually, but if you can present them with a really solid skill challenge or exploration, they will latch onto that, given it's interesting enough to them and it feeds into the abilities they have picked up. So how do you engage your power gamer? A couple of different ways you can do that actually. Stressing the story elements, rewards such as quest XP. If they know that they have to fulfill a story element rather than just kill monsters, if there are objectives they have to fulfill and that will get them experience points, they're all for that. Using a desired magic item as an adventure hook. If there's a magic item they particularly like and feel would be useful to their character, make it part of the adventure as the adventure hook, or something they need to strive towards, and that will help push them through the story. Facilitating access to new options and powers. You still need to be careful about this because there is no limit to what they will find interesting. Including encounters that emphasize their player character attributes. If you play to their strengths, they will love that sort of thing because they're looking for that particular feedback. They want to know that what they have built works well for them, and they will often share their experience and knowledge with other players, making them much more skilled at building a character. But remember, they will also overshadow things that are more revolving around role play. And I mean role play in terms of something like personality flaws, ideals, bonds. Those things can be sort of drifted and will drift away. Background stuff, they're less interested in. I have seen a combination of that, and there is always a combination of all styles anyway. So some of the things that you need to be careful with regard to power gamers. Be sure that the power gamer doesn't do the following. Become a lot more powerful than the other characters. This is really quite common, and you've probably heard this before. It's very easy for them to build a character that's more powerful than everybody else, even with the same criteria and rules that the other players have, simply because they spent more time figuring out how to make it work. Trying to take more of their share of the treasure. If there is stuff that they feel will help make their character more efficient, they are going to jump onto the bandwagon in terms of magic items and other items that are mundane. So just be careful that you have a system in place for sharing out loot that's reasonably sensible and fairish in some way. Otherwise, they'll tend to take a lot. Be careful they don't treat the other characters as their lackeys. You will find that this can happen. I certainly have seen it happen more than a few times. Now, here's a couple of things that I would also suggest to you. With regard to power gamers, allow them to rebuild their character outside of game time. Now, the reason for doing this is simply because they love new options, they love trying new stuff out, and once they've tried something out, they tend to get bored. So they get bored with character options very fast. So giving them the option to rebuild their character is a good thing. Otherwise, it's going to be a little bit awkward for you, as you'll find them trying to ditch their player character and their PC, that is, and pick up a new character because this one looks more interesting. They've already tried the other one and now they want to try something else. Be very wary about requests to use unearthed arcana, untested play material, and third-party player options. They love this sort of stuff, but you need to be careful because there's no end to the stuff they will rifle through to find something that probably will give them a loophole, an advantage, or break the game and make life more difficult for you and for the other players and push them into the essentially being more powerful and more efficient than the rest of the group. So those are things you need to be careful with regard to the power gamers. But they are highly predictable and actually reasonably easy to manage if you know what you're doing. Okay, next one. And I'm actually, this particular style of play is the Slayer. I'm actually a Slayer also. Slayers, like power gamers, enjoy combat, but they're not actually power gamers. Slayers like to kick butt. They like to tar the monsters. They like to make things happen. They love combat. And it doesn't need to be kill the monsters, as long as there's some sort of combat, whether there's objectives in the combat, whether there's interesting things going on in the environment. They clearly love that sort of thing. They will beat up the baddies and see that as clear success to them. Okay, so that's essentially how they operate. A Slayer will sometimes optimize their character just like a power gamer, which is why they are often mistaken as a power gamer when in fact they're not. They're not a power gamer, they are simply doing the basics. Usually they won't spend a lot of time in that area. They might pick up simple options just to get the action moving faster. So in other words, they won't necessarily pick up options that are more combat effective, but if it will speed up play and move the combat forward faster so they can have more combat during a game session, they'll do that sort of thing. They spend less time on story and roleplay elements to a large degree. They really want to fight monsters all the time and take bold actions all the time. So giving them something like the skill challenge or skill checks to make is always a good idea. That can actually help break things up so you don't wind up with a whole series of combats one after the other. So how do you engage the Slayer? The Slayer is a tough one to engage sometimes, and this is because if you engage them, you wind up with the game turning into one great huge long combat. So how do you engage the Slayer? By springing an unexpected combat or battle. Random encounters that are combat focused or battles, they love that sort of thing. Particularly use it when they look like they're getting bored, because you don't want a Slayer who is bored. They will start attacking NPCs and allies and even the players' characters, okay? Make some battles really simple and quick and others more complicated. So mix it up. Give them easy, medium, hard, deadly. Vividly describe the havoc that the Slayer is wreaking, or that the monsters are wreaking, or NPCs are wreaking on their character. They love vivid descriptions. And I hate to say it, but they love it. The more gory, the better. It's not very helpful if you've got kids, though. Recruit them to track initiative during combat. In fact, it's great if you can get them to do anything useful, like looking up rules. They are really into that sort of thing. Even power gamers, you can let them look up the rule and then present it to you if you're looking up rules in the middle of game time. Those are good times and good things to give them to do to stop them from unwinding at the table. Be sure that the Slayer doesn't do the following though. Ruin your adventure by killing monsters the characters should have talked to, because this can happen. Now, you can't stop them from doing it, but you need to be aware that they will probably try to do this sometimes. They might rush past a social interaction, even a skill challenge, so that they can get to the next fight. So make your social interactions interesting enough that they want to be part of that. Make the skill challenges interesting enough that they want to be part of that as well. If your skill challenge allows them to use their weapons and their ability to fight in some way, that's always good too. It doesn't need to be a full-fledged battle, but that will help slow down their ravenous nature for combat. They can, as I said, they can be mistaken for power gamers. They really do consider social interactions a total distraction, and you need to be careful that they will overrun other players who are really trying really hard to engage in that sort of thing. So just be wary of that. Try to give them something to do. You need at least one battle or combat every session, probably more, to deal with somebody who is a Slayer. Beware of sessions just turning into one long battle, because what they will do is once they're in a location, if you're in a dungeon in particular, with lots of monsters in each room, is they will start opening doors and letting more monsters into the same location. You'll start off with one encounter turning into 3 encounters running at the same time. So those are things that they can tend to do. I've seen that happen more than a few times at my table, and it's not really helpful for the rest of the group. The next one, I rather like these. These are the storytellers. They love to tell a story. They love playing in an adventure where the narrative of the game allows them to play one of the characters there. Individual character motivations are important. Things like personality is important to them. But they see the game as an ongoing chronicle of events in a fantasy world. And they really want to be part of that tale. And it doesn't need to be all about them as long as they are part of that tale. For storytellers, the rules are simply there to support them having their story. In fact, they really don't give a toss about the rules. They believe that when the rules get in the way, the narrative should win out. They will look for compromise in some aspects to this, but not always. A storyteller will often provide extensive backgrounds for their character, much like the actor. They will work hard to make their character fit into your story and be part of the overall main arc. So give them the opportunity to do that by running a session 0, and that will make your life so much easier. They like drama. They like dramatic scenes. They like reoccurring characters in your story that they get to. So when a villain reoccurs and shows up, that's really good for them. They prefer the adventure that includes at least one plot. So more than one plot is good. If you don't give them a really strong hook, it's not going to be enough for them. You need to give them a reason for doing what they're doing. Otherwise, they get a bit angsty. So how do you engage the storyteller? So facilitate. Give them the opportunity for their player character backgrounds to develop as part of the overall story. Use their backgrounds to help feed your adventure. Make sure you can help them tie themselves to non-player characters. Include at least one plot as I described in the adventure. Recruit them to record important events and encounters. The storyteller makes a great note taker. That is something that they will do. They will take notes of names of characters, NPCs, things that have taken place, goals, all of the fine detail. They will take that information down. Sometimes the explorer will do that sort of thing as well, but the storyteller, you pretty much guaranteed they're right onto that. Things you need to be careful with regard to the storyteller. So be sure the storyteller doesn't do the following. Insist on making their character the center of the story. This is a little bit like the actor. It can happen sometimes where a dungeon master doesn't realize that making the entire adventure revolve around one character is a bad idea, particularly as that character might die or might not be able to show up from week to week, and therefore that creates a whole lot of hassle for everybody. So be mindful of that, because that can happen. Be sure that they don't dictate the actions of the other characters at your table so that it fits more ideally with the story. What will happen with a storyteller sometimes is they will say, look, no, you should do this. No, you do this. So be careful, because they can sort of jump on and take control of other people's characters so that the story moves in the direction and the way that they think it should go. And if you have a vision yourself and they are trying to fulfill that vision, they will certainly do that. They are super helpful for helping you move the story forward, but they can sort of dominate the table if you're not careful. Things I have noticed, they really do like to help build the story. So if you give them the opportunity to name locations and build out locations, they will certainly do that. They might try to hijack the story. They might even try to hijack your position as the dungeon master, and you wind up with a secondary dungeon master sitting right beside you. I would exploit that to some degree, but make it clear that these are the tasks I would like you to do. Sometimes it might be as simple as, can you please get out 6 orcs from my miniature box? Or can you please lay out a map? Or sometimes if you just got to draw out a map, give them the map and they can draw it out if you're using a battle grid of some kind. That will help quite a lot. They might push the story forward over other characters. So in other words, what that means is the story might be so important to them that no matter what's happening with somebody who's trying to develop their character, there is no time for this. We're going to just, no, it's out of the way. And also they might sort of push some of the other players to getting quite frustrated at times as well. I've said this about many of the different styles of play as it happens. Okay, next on the list is the thinker. Now, I like thinkers. They're very quiet. They have a particular focus. They are relatively easy to keep happy, but it's difficult to keep a thinker happy at the table with a whole lot of different other play styles. Thinkers like to make careful choices. They like to reflect on the challenge and find the best way to overcome anything. They will do a lot of planning. In fact, they will spend a lot of time building up their resources. They really do enjoy the planning process. They like to solve challenges, so puzzles and traps. They like to be creative in how they actually solve a problem. The thinker is always thinking about something. So what you want to try to do is get the thinker to move towards thinking about sound tactics, thinking about how the best way to interact with an NPC is. That's the sort of stuff they really like. They're not really up to the concept of just brute strength doesn't really appeal to them. So they sometimes can be at loggerheads with the Slayer and the Power Gamer, just because their focus is often just combat. A thinker engages in any challenge that has a puzzle to solve. They choose their actions very carefully for the best possible results, as I said. They are happy to win without action, drama, or tension. They do not require combat. They do not require drama. They do not require tension. They are happy to resolve and be successful if everything is quiet. They prefer time to consider options over bold actions. They are essentially the absolute reverse of the instigator. And for obvious reasons. You can't have a thinker operating just like an instigator. That wouldn't make an awful lot of sense, would it? So some of the things that you need to do to engage the thinker. How do you engage the thinker? Include encounters that require problem-solving skills. Reward their planning and tactics with in-game benefits. It doesn't need to be magic items, but it might be as simple as awarding more experience points. It might be giving them inspiration. It doesn't matter. Find some way of rewarding that planning process, particularly if they can do it quickly. Occasionally allow a smart plan to cause a one-sided win. In other words, if it's a really well formatted and developed plan and the dice aren't with them, sometimes it's actually a good idea just to let them have it. Particularly if it's tempting, if their plan was so good that you feel that the encounter that you created is just too easy and you are tempted to adjust and make that encounter more difficult during play. Just let them have it. It's better to just let them have it. Recruit their help to come up with quests and ideas that the players' characters can do, because they're really good at doing that sort of thing. Now, things you need to be careful with regard to the thinker. They will constantly tell the other players what to do. Constantly. So that's something you need to be very careful of. And remind them that other people are playing at the game and they get to make choices just like them. They might take the game to a grinding halt as they consider every tactical option till they have figured out the absolute best option at the table at that time. And this can drive some of the players nuts. It will drive your slayer, your instigator, your storytellers. Different play styles, they will go completely bananas if it grinds to a halt. The worst case scenario is though the instigator doing something completely rash because too much time has been spent planning. So those are things to be careful of. Things that I have found when it comes to the thinker is that they love puzzles, they really do. The problem is they might be the only one at the table who understands how to solve that puzzle and everybody else is just waiting. So be careful not to make the puzzles too involved so they require a lot of time. They will certainly slow your game to an absolute crawl quite often. And it's really tough to sort of deal with that. I found an egg timer was really helpful for dealing with that sort of thing. And you might use that technique, you might use something else. They can infuriate, as I said, the slayer, the instigator, even the power gamer, and sometimes even the storyteller. Okay, the last one, the one that I have to say you will probably come across the most, and that is the watcher. The watcher is the casual player sometimes. Sometimes they are the new player. They come into the game because they really want to be part of a social event or interaction. The watcher might be very shy. They are usually very laid back. They can really get along with just about anybody. They want to participate. They just don't really care too much about getting deeply immersed in anything. They are not very assertive. They're not terribly involved in all the details. They're not really going to be too concerned about the rules, sometimes not even the story. Really, they're there to play the game, enjoy the game, and be part of your social circle. And they are also, as I said, often new players, but sometimes not always. They are actually one of the hardest, by the hardest style to actually figure out what's going on for them. I'm going to talk about more of that in a second. So a watcher, they will show up to part of the game group sometimes. Not all watchers are like this, but often you can tell they are a watcher if this is how they're operating. They do help to calm down disputes by being attached to the game but detached emotionally. They are often will fill in holes for the other group. So if there is a role that needs to be filled, they will often fill that role, whether it be a cleric or a fighter or a wizard. They will try to fill those roles if somebody else doesn't want to fill that role. And they do help facilitate fun. So how do you engage the watcher? Man, you never force them to be involved more than they really want to be. You can usually tell by what they're saying and by body language more likely. So don't force the issue. You do need to try and get them to try stuff, but you need to not force the issue. Accept that they are fine with just having a watcher status. I know this sounds odd because we're not really engaging them, but honestly, this is the best way to engage a watcher. Prompt them when you need to. So if they're watching and they sort of forget that it's their turn, that sort of stuff, or you need them to respond, they might have said something and they'll sort of just watch and just see what other people are doing. They can be overshadowed by the other play styles very, very easily. So they do require prompting. You just need to be very careful about how you do it. So things you need to be careful that the watcher doesn't do. Distract the other players by watching TV, playing video games, surfing the internet on their phone, tablets, laptops, all that sort of stuff. Disappearing from the table for all sorts of lengths of time. Sometimes they can be gone for short periods of time, sometimes for long periods of time. You don't really know what it is. For all you know, they could just be reading a magazine in the toilet. Those are the things you need to be careful of. And it's very hard to deal with a situation like this because if they disappear, you can't go chasing them down. My advice to you is if it's really necessary for them to be there and do something at that time, send one of the other players to go and find them, okay? So things that I have found that tend to happen with watchers. They are incredibly hard to figure out. It's so hard to figure out what's going on inside their head. On top of that, their body language doesn't match up with what is going on inside their head sometimes. So you might be looking at their body language and you'll read them wrong. It's happened to me many, many times. This tends to be, as I said, new players. And some watchers never change. Some watchers are always watchers, and it's all right to have somebody at the table who's a watcher. The worst thing you can have is have an entire table full of watchers, because you're going to be doing a lot of work if that happens. Okay, so essentially that is everything I have to say on play styles, and I have said so much, maybe too much. Most people are a mixture of all of these play styles or a combination of some of these play styles. Try to allow for a bit of every play style in your game if you can. This is a very general overview, and as I said, just my opinion and some of the material that the Wizards of the Coast team have written many years ago that I have pulled and plucked from certain locations that I thought you might find useful in your game. So, if you found this interesting, useful, educational, or entertaining, please share and like the video. If you like this sort of thing, please consider subscribing to my channel because I will do more stuff like this in the future. Hit the bell button to be notified if you want to get updates and know when I am live and when I publish new videos. Now, if you want to support my channel, you supported my channel by watching this very long video, and thank you very much. I have hundreds more, not all of them long, some are short, and you're welcome to go and watch them. That will help support me. I don't do Patreon, but down in the description, you will find affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon where you can buy stuff online. I get a small commission. You pay exactly the same price. Just go through the link, buy what you want. You do not have to buy the thing I've linked to. Now, this is your opportunity to disagree with me, say hi, give me some additional information that you might have picked up something that I have missed. I might have missed something. You might have players or a combination of players who consist of these sorts of things. I always find it quite useful to, when you're starting your game, to have a look at your players and sort of figure out where they sort of fall. Is this person falling into this bracket? Now, as always, it's important to be careful about pigeonholing somebody, because play styles can change in a player or person over time. So that's what the live chat's for. Give your feedback there. If you're not part of the live chat, that's what the comment section's all about, and I think you should feel free to share what you want to share, and what you don't want to share, you don't have to share. And that's really all I have to say. And till next time, keep rolling those 20s.